So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Liz Evans to the stage.
Hello everyone, it's great to be here. It doesn't get much better than this, does it? 400 dissidents in a room together. Yeah, really loving the energy and the vibe here. So I'm sure you're all hungry, but before lunch I'm going to take you on a roller coaster ride. We're going to be discussing the controlled demolition of medical ethics and the silencing of ethical doctors. So buckle up. Okay, so it's been a really busy 5 years since I co-founded the UK Medical Freedom Alliance in October 2020 to challenge unethical COVID policies. And as we've heard the other speakers say, during the COVID era, government policies robbed people of their most basic rights in the name of public safety. Ethical and moral norms were violated, causing tremendous damage to our society and setting a dangerous precedent. And we currently face multiple threats to the practice of ethical medicine. I'm just going to go through a few of those today. So to start with, what exactly are medical ethics and why are they important in a civilized society? Well, they are grounded in a Christian understanding of humanity, that each person is a unique being of infinite value to be treated with dignity. That we are born with certain God-given rights. We're not given our rights by government. Medical ethics enshrine into law and professional codes of practice the doctor's duty to treat every person with autonomy and dignity, to seek to do good and to do no harm. The ethical practice of medicine uses a patient-centered model where the doctor acts in the best interest of their patient, and informed consent must be obtained for all treatment after a full explanation of risks and benefits, and with no coercion. Privacy and confidentiality are vital. All medical interventions carry a risk of harm, so there is a duty to act with care and proportionality. Ethical codes hold healthcare professionals accountable, and they protect vulnerable patients from abuse. Crucially, these codes can't just be discarded in an emergency. This is when they are most needed to protect individuals against panicky state decisions. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about COVID, but during the COVID era, I'm sure you'll agree, government failed to uphold basic morality. Their policies violated fundamental ethical principles, and these policies were then enacted by healthcare professionals who abandoned their ethical codes. The unethical was normalised with mandated medical interventions such as face masks, PCR tests, and even COVID jabs. The novel gene therapies were recklessly rolled out to billions of people with no long-term safety data, using coercion and lies, claiming that the products were safe and effective, even for pregnant women and children. Hospital patients and care home residents were denied visitors for months on end. Dangerous one-size-fits-all protocols were used both to treat COVID and to deny treatment to others through blanket do not resuscitate orders and barbaric end-of-life protocols. Children's needs were sacrificed for adults. The elderly and sick were left to suffer and die alone. And people lost jobs and livelihoods, pushed into poverty for refusing to take a state-mandated injection. There appears to be an ongoing and concerted effort from the powers that be to eradicate traditional medical ethics, informed consent, medical choice, and the doctor-patient relationship. The controlled demolition by government policies and the global agendas we've been hearing about from Tess and Ben of fundamental principles that have underpinned medical practice for millennia. So this is quite a busy slide, but as we emerge from the COVID era, this slide lists some of the multiple threats to our medical freedom, bodily autonomy, and the doctor-patient relationship. The Hippocratic Oath to first do no harm is under attack, from bills seeking to introduce assisted suicide and to decriminalise abortion up to birth, and by the ongoing abuse of end-of-life protocols and do not resuscitate orders, which undermine the sanctity of life. Medicine is being steered towards a one-size-fits-all approach through centrally driven protocols which steer doctors into prescribing often expensive drugs and now medicating the healthy with so-called preventative drugs. There is even a proposal to screen all newborn babies' genomes as part of personalised medicine, targeting them with preventative drugs to take for life, for diseases they may never have got. Then the doctor-patient relationship is under attack. Ethical doctors are vital to protect the public from greedy corporate interests, yet they are being systematically targeted and silenced. The indoctrination of doctors begins even before they start medical school. Full vaccination with a long list of jabs is required to even start the course. And then there are constant requirements to take the latest booster dose or new vaccine to proceed on the course or work in the NHS. Privacy and confidentiality of your healthcare data and medical records is no longer a given, as NHS records are shared with outside agencies and private corporations, as we've heard. They're used to make money and target interventions. And the public are being corralled onto the NHS app, which will likely be tied in with the proposed digital ID. Then the concept of bodily autonomy, that you alone have ownership and control over your body, has been undermined by a recent change to the law on organ donation, which requires you to actively opt out before you die to avoid forced donation against your family's wishes, which effectively makes the state the owner of your body after death. Then there's a growing concern that the criteria for brain death, to harvest an organ, are too loose, meaning that people may be having their organs harvested while still alive. And organ recipients, the other side, are heavily pressured to take certain vaccines just to qualify for a vitally needed organ. Then informed consent is being ignored, with public health measures such as water fluoridation and a new one, folic acid in flour, which are being imposed on the public, violating their right to refuse a medical treatment. And in schools, children are fed pharmaceutical propaganda without parental oversight or consent, and undergo public health interventions such as weighing and vaccination without their parents present. So all very concerning. So I'm just going to start with two serious threats to the sanctity of life, which completely violate the Hippocratic Oath to first do no harm. So in the middle of a beautiful sunny June this year, the UK experienced one of the most darkest weeks in Parliament, with two key life or death votes. It was a week in which MPs voted to radically change laws that protect the most vulnerable in society, babies in the womb and the dying at the end of their lives. Voting to legalise the killing of unborn babies by their mothers, by decriminalising abortion, and then voting to enable doctors to assist the terminally ill to kill themselves by supplying them with lethal drugs to end their own lives. Both bills are now in the House of Lords for further scrutiny before they become law. So starting with abortion up to birth, on Tuesday, the 17th of June, MPs voted to decriminalise abortion for pregnant women, and they did this through a crafty last-minute amendment, 191, to the Crime and Policing Bill. After less than an hour of debate in Parliament, MPs voted overwhelmingly to pass this Antoniazzi NC1 amendment, which decriminalised women who perform their own abortions for any reason and at any point up to and during birth. Now, it's really important to understand the Abortion Act itself has not changed. Doctors are still prohibited from terminating a pregnancy after 24 weeks, except in certain exceptional circumstances. But now, after 24 weeks, it will be mothers who will be allowed to abort their own babies without medical supervision or help. So if this bill becomes law, backstreet abortions effectively will return to the UK. And this is compounded by the fact that COVID brought in easy access to abortion pills by post, with no in-person consultation required and no proof of gestational age. So with the new amendment, there's a serious risk of women procuring the pills under false pretenses and then to use late in pregnancy. And this will result not only in the destruction of viable, healthy babies, but also will put the mother in grave danger. I'm sure you'll agree it is criminal that such a massive change in abortion law was brought about in such a casual way, via a last-minute amendment to an unrelated bill, sending a clear message to society that an unborn baby's life is not worthy of protection. And we can see a slippery slope that's coming. There will be botched, self-administered abortions, which will inevitably lead to demands for women to be allowed proper medical care with doctor-assisted abortions up to birth. So our hope is that this diabolical amendment will be thrown out by the House of Lords, and this is now a serious possibility. Breaking news, 2 days ago, several peers, about 2/3 of the peers who spoke in the House of Lords, made powerful speeches against this Amendment 191 in the Lord's second reading. And it has since been announced that Baroness Monckton is leading a group of peers seeking to overturn the amendment, and a separate group of peers, led by Baroness Stroud, is seeking to reinstate in-person consultations to get early abortion pills. So hopefully common sense will prevail and this diabolical plan will be thwarted. So the same week, 3 days later, after the abortion amendment was passed, the final vote on Kim Ledbetter's terminally ill adults assisted dying bill saw a majority of MPs voting to allow assisted suicide. Assisted dying is misunderstood by many to be normal palliative care, but it is actually state-assisted suicide. It requires the patient to end their own life using lethal drugs or devices provided by a doctor. And as the bill stands, the doctor can't assist if things go wrong. And death is not guaranteed to be either quick or painless. This bill crosses an ethical Rubicon. Never in the UK have doctors been allowed to participate in deliberately ending life. It would radically and permanently change the doctor-patient relationship, abolishing the requirement that doctors first do no harm and removing the sanctity of life by accepting that some lives have less value and can therefore be terminated. No longer could we, as individuals, assume that the state or our doctor will act in our best interest, as death would be recognised as a legitimate treatment for suffering. And it's far cheaper to end someone's life than to prolong it with high-quality palliative care. Could this explain the pressure on the bill to be passed? It's not hard to imagine the state putting psychological pressure on people to opt for assisted dying rather than long-term care, because they have become a burden on society. This utilitarian scenario is already playing out in countries like Canada, the Netherlands, New Zealand, where assisted dying has been legal for a while. And as we've heard from Ben, the NHS is already broken and rationing resources. But assisted dying is not the answer to a health system that can't cope with existing demands. The solution to the suffering that we are seeing at the end of life is more investment in palliative care. Now, the House of Lords have stepped up again, and there's some cause for hope that this bill won't become law. They have the constitutional power and authority to reject or block the bill because it's a private member's bill and it's not a government bill. Now, there were 200 peers that signed up to speak in their second reading last month, and 2/3 of the peers spoke against the bill, and they made powerful practical, legal, ethical, philosophical and religious arguments. And many also pointed out, as we did when we campaigned, that the bill is poorly drafted with gaping holes and dangerous delegated powers. So even if you supported assisted dying in theory, this is not the bill to bring it in with. Now, former Prime Minister Baroness Hay gave a passionate speech against assisted suicide, and she branded it a license to kill. She argued that people would feel pressure to end their lives, that it sent the message that some lives are worth less than others. And she said, suicide is not okay. Suicide is wrong. This bill is wrong, and in my opinion, it should not pass. So very encouraging. And then Lord Frost made a powerful case for upholding fundamental ethical principles, saying that failure to do so would deprive us of the most basic moral protections in future, and that the ultimate destination of this journey is a utilitarian system with a utilitarian government, where none of us would be safe but at the mercy of the whims of society at the time. And Baroness Fox argued that dismantling centuries-old medical ethics, requiring a doctor to preserve and protect life, would have a seismic impact on societal attitudes to life, illness, and death. And encouragingly, following these debates, they set up a dedicated select committee to further scrutinise the bill before it moves into their committee stage. This was considered a win by the opposition to the bill, and that, alongside the strong opposition in the House of Lords, leaves us really hopeful that this bill will either be voted down or will fail to complete the required remaining stages before the end of the parliamentary session, which would cause the bill to fall. So pray for that. Now, on to the Scottish and UK COVID inquiries. We heard harrowing testimony revealing serious ethical violations. Relatives and care home managers presented compelling evidence of abuse and atrocities that went on behind closed doors as care homes and hospitals banned visitors for months and even years, removing the vital scrutiny and accountability. There were stories of appalling harm and even death. As I mentioned before, blanket do not resuscitate orders were implemented at the beginning of lockdown on all residents, regardless of their age or underlying health, and often without the knowledge or consent of their family or the resident themselves. This was unprecedented and profoundly unethical. It was a one-size-fits-all approach which denied the dignity and humanity of the individual. Residents were often denied GP visits or transfer to hospital if they were sick. Instead, COVID-positive patients or anyone with respiratory symptoms were put on NG 163 end-of-life protocols, sometimes without even seeing a doctor. Food and fluids were withdrawn, starving and dehydrating patients, and powerful sedatives and respiratory depressants like midazolam and morphine were given, hastening death and effectively euthanized. What happened in care homes was described in the inquiry as a generational slaughter, and it appears that a large proportion of the deaths in care homes were not from COVID, as claimed at the time, but were caused by the abuse of end-of-life drugs and protocols, which is what Ben put in his slide. The same discrimination and denial of medical care was also experienced by people with disabilities, including learning disabilities. Shockingly, many of them were told they would not be resuscitated if taken ill with COVID. Is this the action of a civilized society? And you may sort of be thinking that these protocols and practices are echoing the Liverpool Care Pathway, which was supposedly abolished in 2013 following an independent review showing that hospitals were using the pathway to hasten the death of vulnerable patients without their knowledge or consent. It came out at the time they were being starved and dehydrated to death with the help of strong sedatives and opioids. But what happened during COVID shows that this abhorrent practice has continued, and that there is a very toxic and dangerous culture around end-of-life care which puts vulnerable patients at risk. So I'm sure you've noticed that our healthcare system is morphing in front of our eyes, and not in a good way. Do you remember a time when you had a family doctor who knew your medical history and circumstances? I do. Who did home visits when you were poorly? When GP receptionists were friendly and helpful? When you could get an in-person appointment within a day or two, or an urgent one on the day? When your doctor had time to talk to you with 15-minute consultations? When the prescription pad was not the first course of action? And when the doctor-patient relationship was privileged and privacy and confidentiality were a given? This was a time when very few people were taking numerous drugs, and when we only had a handful of vaccines during our childhood and no regular vaccines as an adult, apart from the occasional tetanus booster. Compare this to today. Healthcare is now big business. Pharma has co-opted healthcare systems to create a supremely wealthy and powerful global medical industrial complex, pushing pharmaceutical products as the solution to and the prevention for every ill. True family doctors practicing patient-centred medicine are few and far between. Most practices operate with no named GP for each patient. Patients are kept at arm's length from doctors, with receptionists acting as fierce gatekeepers, requiring patients to disclose medical symptoms and other highly personal information just to access an appointment. Digital healthcare is being increasingly pushed, and a high proportion of consultations are done online or over the phone. Sometimes you have to even go through an online e-consult just to get an appointment. And then the short 5 to 10 minute consultations mean that doctors too often reach for protocols and prescribe a drug. So polypharmacy is common. So the NHS app has been widely adopted, although I imagine probably not by people in this room. But it's being sold as convenient and efficient, because on this app you can book and manage your GP appointments and hospital appointments, order repeat prescriptions, register your organ donation decision, make sure you do register that you're not happy. You can access 111 for health advice, and you can view your GP records. But most people, a recent survey, it was about 63%, are unaware that these health records and data are no longer kept private and confidential as part of public-private partnerships. They can be anonymised and shared with outside organisations, including drug companies, for your good, of course, unless you've actively opted out. And the NHS is even allowed to sell your data to the private sector for public benefit, as long as it's not for profit. And they say that the data is usually anonymised, but that personally identifiable data can be used if there is a clear health benefit. But according to who? So the NHS budget is over 200 billion a year. I think Ben said it was about 230 billion, and that makes it a valuable pot of potential revenue for Pharma. And they've successfully captured journals, academic institutions and regulators. So alongside their lobbying of the government, this allows them to get new drugs approved quickly and to influence the top-down protocols used by doctors to treat patients. This ensures that their products are rolled out to as many people as possible. This hijacking of our healthcare system and budget by Pharma requires the erosion of medical ethics. Their products are usually rolled out to the masses on one-size-fits-all protocols, and this removes decision-making from individual doctors for individual patients, thus deprofessionalising the doctor and exploiting patients. Now, when Jesus said that healthy people don't need a doctor, but only the sick, he was speaking metaphorically about sin. But his words were also a truism, which would have been understood at the time. Until very recently, most pharmaceutical products treated sick people, apart from a small number of vaccines. Over the last couple of decades, though, Pharma have shifted their focus to the far bigger market of the healthy, developing and marketing preventative drugs and vaccines to be taken repeatedly by healthy people, on the promise of preventing an illness that you may never have got in the first place. Statins, weight loss jabs, and mRNA vaccines are just a few examples. A highly lucrative business model serving the bottom line of Pharma, but not public health. And this has resulted in an increased public acceptance of taking these preventative drugs like statins for life, products that promise better life and longer life, and claiming to reduce the risk of serious and common diseases that people fear the most, like heart disease, cancer, and dementia. There's also been an explosion in the number of vaccines offered to both children and adults, claimed claiming to prevent a myriad of often benign infectious diseases, and hundreds more are being developed on the dangerous mRNA genetic platform. And the biggest winners in this scenario are Big Pharma, with a guaranteed long-term income stream with every new vaccine that's added to the schedule. So on to statins. So NICE data from 2025 suggests that 7 to 8 million UK adults are on statins. That costs the NHS £100 million a year, and more are being targeted because the prescribing criteria is being widened well beyond those with active cardiovascular disease and high cholesterol. In January 2023, NICE published draft guidance recommending that people at a low risk, less than 10% of cardiovascular disease, could also be offered statins. This would make around 25 million UK citizens eligible to take these drugs long term. Now, you may or may not be surprised to learn that the scientific rationale for statins is highly contested. This idea that lowering your cholesterol will reduce your risk of heart disease or improve your health and longevity. It's a paradigm which has created one of the most lucrative drugs for pharma. Yet numerous published studies and books challenge this paradigm, including books by doctors such as Malcolm McKendrick and Alcee Malhotra, which interrogate the questionable science of lowering cholesterol. They expose serious risks and unpleasant side effects from statins and give you natural alternatives. And then weight loss jabs. These were originally developed to treat type 2 diabetes, but they're increasingly being used to treat obesity. And there are also wild claims that these miracles of science can prevent all manner of diseases. And these headlines show some of the outlandish claims for the healing powers of Ozempic, Mounjaro, and the like. Claims that the jabs would halve the risk of cancer, treat depression, effortlessly reduce alcohol intake, and even make healthy, slim people live longer. A fountain of youth. Not mentioned in any of these articles is the appalling side effect profile listed on the slide, which includes serious life-changing and even life-ending conditions. And every media report also failed to mention the ongoing class action Ozempic lawsuit in the US against Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. Over 1,800 claimants who've been permanently damaged by these dangerous drugs. Some of them are suing the drug companies after developing blood clots which cause blindness. Others developed gastroparesis or paralysis of the stomach, which may be irreversible even after stopping the jabs. It's a psychologically devastating condition with the loss of the pleasure of eating and the stress of trying to maintain adequate nourishment. Victims of gastroparesis are left with constant nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, reflux, bloating, severe dehydration, nutritional deficiencies, severe weight loss, and a poor quality of life. And there is no known cure. But predictably, the media hype preceded calls for a mass rollout of the drug. And this included the NHS Medical Director, Professor Sir Stephen Powis, who called for a mass rollout like statins in June this year. And that rollout has already begun. It costing the NHS around £3,000 per patient per year. At the moment, 3.4 million people are currently eligible, so this will be a massive cost to the NHS. And an eye-watering 2.5 million UK citizens are already estimated to be taking these jabs, mainly via private prescriptions. Are we sleepwalking into another public health disaster? Rolling out novel drugs with no long-term safety data to millions of people without proper informed consent, overplaying benefits, underplaying risks, and failing to address more natural solutions for obesity, such as lifestyle and dietary modifications. The jabs are being sold as a quick fix for a complex problem and creating a generation of people who will need regular injections for life just to maintain a normal weight, whilst boosting the coffers of Big Pharma with a steady stream of taxpayers' money and doing nothing to improve public health. Does this sound familiar? Safe and effective? And babies and children. They've long been the mainstay of a highly lucrative and rapidly expanding vaccine industry. Children in the UK are now routinely given tens of vaccines before they are 18 years old, with more vaccines being added regularly to the extensive childhood schedule here. 50 years ago, children had far fewer vaccines and far less chronic disease. Over my whole childhood, I only had 10 separate vaccines for 6 diseases. And they are definitely Big Pharma gunning for babies and children. They're targeting this lucrative cohort with lifelong medication to prevent diseases they claim they're at risk for. In June this year, Wes Streeting made a chilling announcement that the NHS will map every newborn baby's DNA to predict and prevent disease as part of what he called a revolution in healthcare to transform the NHS from a service that diagnoses and treats disease to one that predicts and prevents it. Within a decade, the NHS plans to sequence the genome of every newborn to assess their risk of hundreds of diseases, to then give them personalised healthcare, i.e. long-term expensive drugs. This is a predatory move by Pharma, enabled by the NHS, to get customers for life, and dressed up as putting the fluffy-sounding personalised medicine at the heart of care. So cost aside, which would obviously be astronomical, just imagine the emotional and spiritual impact of such a policy. Words of death and disease being spoken over a beautiful, healthy newborn baby, putting anxiety and grief into the hearts of their parents at what should be the most joyful time of celebration, filling them with fear of cancer, dementia, and other horrific diseases in their baby's future. From modern-day fortune tellers tempting them with a panacea that will keep their child safe. This is a very dark and evil agenda. And Pharma's grip on our healthcare system is tightening, enabling ever more taxpayers' money to flow into its coffers as ever more healthy people are put on preventative drugs for life. And the UK is aggressively pushing this agenda, as we have seen in our previous brilliant presentations. Wes Streeting recently promised personalised health MOTs to be offered to everyone approaching retirement, so that's probably quite a few of us in this room. Happy days, including genomic screening and AI interpretation. I bet you're all feeling really reassured by that. And this is Wes Streeting's 10-year NHS health plan, released in July. It sets out 3 major shifts in the way healthcare is delivered. He wants to move healthcare from hospital to community, from analogue to digital, and from treating sickness to prevention. The plan uses emotive language to set the scene, that the NHS stands at an existential brink and has a stark choice, reform or die. Yeah, I'm with you. If you can bear it, have a read of this really disturbing document. It sets out how the reimagining of the NHS will create a utopian, sustainable future of a patient-controlled system. So, we're in control. With instant access to appointments, disease prediction and prevention, care in your home, and even a doctor in your pocket. Imagine that. We are promised the most digitally accessible health system in the world. Your NHS app will function as the front door to the entire NHS. AI will be seamlessly integrated into clinical pathways and be the trusted assistant of every nurse and doctor. And disturbingly, patients will be routinely monitored using wearables. Then the roles of life sciences and tech companies in service delivery will be expanded, with a very unhealthy and obsessive focus on accessing your genome. A new genomic population, that's everyone, not just the newborns or the older people, everyone. Population health screening service is promised for all by 2030. Yeah, you guessed. And I'm sure you'll all be delighted about the new £600 million government partnership with the Wellcome Trust to create a new health data research service, your NHS data used for the common good. Noticeably missing from the plan is any mention of ethics, informed consent, or the doctor-patient relationship. And have no doubt that these ambitious and well-funded changes in healthcare are part of the bigger plan to create a digital economy, cashless society and digital ID. The health component is being pushed by supranational organisations like the WHO, the UN and the WEF, with their pandemic treaty, their IHR amendments, One Health Agenda, Pact for the Future, etc., etc. If they have their way, you will own nothing, including your body, and you will be very unhappy. And this World Economic Forum image can be found on the UK government's own website, showing how healthcare, the one at the top of the wheel, is integral to the whole digital control grid being pushed so aggressively by the global elites. Through wearables, the NHS app, sharing of health records, which will remove the privacy and confidentiality that has always been a core part of ethical medicine. The public is being corralled into a form of digital slavery. We must resist. And ethical doctors are key to this resistance. A doctor who upholds his or her oath to first do no harm and their duty to put the interest of the patient in front of them above all other interests. Standing between a vulnerable patient and a predatory healthcare system, and providing vital protection for the individual against global vested interests. Vested interests and unhealthy ideologies that have captured the regulators that should be protecting the public and upholding medical ethics. Now, under the GMC's Good Medical Practice Guidelines, doctors must speak out when they see a risk of harm to patients. Yet during COVID, most of the medical profession remained silent. They failed to speak out against unethical and unsafe policies. In stark contrast, good ethical doctors were threatened and punished for acting as their patient's advocate, for treating COVID, or for voicing vaccine safety concerns. They faced long GMC investigations and fitness to practice hearings. Some, like Doctors Sam White, David Cartland, Anne McCluskey, Mohammed Adil, and Jane Donegan, and many others were sacked or struck off. And those still being hounded by the GMC include doctors like Asim Malhotra and Sarah Myhill. And the brilliant Dr. Ahmed Malik, who I think spoke at your last conference, he was thrown out of his private hospitals and then voluntarily gave up his license to practice. He said on a recent podcast that the GMC has been weaponized to punish doctors. And this slide shows how badly the regulators are failing the public and doctors. These are just two of several appalling recent decisions by the Medical Practitioners Tribunal Service, who carry out the GMC fitness to practice hearings. So on the one hand, Dr. Suhail Anjum faces no sanction for leaving his anaesthetised patient on the table mid-operation to go into another theatre and have sex with a nurse. No sanction at all, nothing. Yet, Dr. Sam White, who I'm sure you all know, was struck off for speaking out about the harms of COVID policies such as face masks and COVID vaccines. And this is all part of a wider NHS culture of silencing whistleblowers. This Telegraph investigation revealed that healthcare staff who raise concerns face harassment and bullying from NHS management through internal investigations, disciplinary hearings and legal battles, and even facing referral to their regulators. This appears designed to break the whistleblower, to deter others from speaking out and to cover up the issues raised. Following the infected blood scandal inquiry, Dame Carrie McEwen, the GMC chair, admitted that they know referrals can be used to intimidate doctors, but she urged doctors to speak up anyway. And we know at UKMFA of many vexatious referrals of doctors and nurses to the GMC, NMC and to their NHS medical directors for raising the alarm over COVID vaccine safety, either publicly or even in private consultations with patients. They have been threatened with disciplinary actions, sacking or striking off, and they've been gagged through bans on raising concerns either publicly or even in internal meetings. Now, it's extremely dangerous for the public if doctors can't risk speaking out in their professional capacity and duty to raise patient safety concerns, and aren't allowed to use their clinical skills and experience to treat patients in the way they judge best outside of NHS protocols. So in October last year, we sent a joint open letter to Judge Deborah Taylor. She's the CEO of the Medical Practitioner Tribunal Service, raising concerns about the referral to the GMC of whistleblowing doctors questioning COVID vaccine safety. We reported to her that this had a chilling effect amongst doctors of self-censorship, leading to a failure to properly investigate harms or advocate for patient choice or even patient safety. We heard nothing. So fed up with receiving no replies to our open letters, in June this year we wrote to the NHS Speaking Up scheme. This was set up to support whistleblowers in the wake of the infected blood scandal. And we highlighted how the lack of support for those who have spoken up against COVID vaccine injuries. And we told them that doctors and nurses had been smeared and gaslit and offered subtle threats of damaged career prospects after raising safety concerns. We were astonished to receive a reply, and we had the offer of a meeting. So a group of us met online with the Speaking Up team, and we hoped that this would be the moment we had our concerns heard and for action to be taken. What we found were some lovely people doing their very best in a very toxic culture and system, who see the problems but are not empowered to do very much about it. And we concluded that this Speaking Up scheme is fundamentally flawed. It's not set up to address issues with national policies or protocols. And these have no authors or ownership, so they're very hard to challenge. All it's doing is treating the symptoms by supporting bullied healthcare workers, but not the cause, those who are silencing and harassing the whistleblowers. Speaking Up have got no power to protect whistleblowers from persecution. They can't sanction workplace bullies, and they cannot, crucially, ensure that evidence presented is investigated or defective policies changed. For example, they cannot compel the NHS to engage with our concerns regarding COVID jab safety in a meaningful way. And any whistleblower who reports a serious safety issue relating to an official government or NHS policy is held to an impossibly high bar of proof that they are correct, and faces punishment if their concerns are unfounded. So this flawed system, yet again, it's protecting policies ahead of patients and individual whistleblowers, and it is preventing the timely identification of dangerous drugs or vaccines or interventions. So at this point, we are faced with a stark and urgent choice between Hippocratic, ethical, patient-centred medicine and technocratic, dehumanised, protocol-driven medicine. If doctors cannot act autonomously and ethically and are mandated to follow top-down protocols, which are one-size-fits-all, they are reduced to being agents of the state. Patients are dehumanised and atrocities will inevitably follow. And at its core, I believe this is a spiritual battle against evil, against a coordinated push to remove the intrinsic value of every human life, creating a dystopian digital slave system. This could be the biggest challenge humanity has ever faced and will require a strong collective resistance. We must shine a light on the agenda and actions being rolled out and expose the lies, greed, and anti-human ideology. And with hundreds of mRNA vaccines in the pipeline, and from tests we've heard about the WHO seeking more power and control, we must urgently re-establish ethical red lines that can never be crossed by policymakers or healthcare workers, regardless of the circumstances. So we clearly have a problem, but all is not lost. I've got a few ideas as to what can be done to turn things around. Firstly, doctors need to reclaim their profession and return to patient-centred medicine, applying ethical principles, moral values, and interpretations to science. They must reject the technocratic, dehumanised approach of the NHS 10-year plan. It's not the answer to the problems we face, but will simply make a bad situation worse. Doctors must relearn the art of medicine, the observation, intuition, experience, wisdom, compassion, and innovation of the individual doctor, who must be free to act in their best clinical and professional judgment. Doctors and healthcare professionals in general need to rediscover critical thinking and intellectual humility. They must reject cancel culture and embrace debate, and challenge policies and protocols. Above all, they need to listen to their patients and respect their autonomy and wishes. Our political system is clearly corrupted and broken. It's not serving ordinary people, but is instead collaborating with big corporations and unelected NGOs to serve their interests. We must deal with regulatory capture and corruption and make Pharma liable for all harm caused. And we need new parties and honourable politicians to challenge the new normal and to embrace a more humane vision of how to run society and healthcare. Systems that respect and honour the sanctity of each life. By decentralising healthcare decisions and policies and allowing individual doctors to practice ethical, patient-centred medicine. Medical ethics must be put back into the centre of political conversations and the framing of policies. Crucially, politicians and bureaucrats have no place in the practice of medicine on individuals. And then coming finally to we the people, this is what Tess was talking about, sovereignty. We the people need to learn to say no. We must reject technocratic medicine. We must demand that our doctors practice ethical medicine and uphold our right to informed consent, bodily autonomy, and medical choice. And we must empower ourselves. We need to look beyond the Pharma model for a more holistic approach to healthcare. We need to empower ourselves with knowledge of how to live to maximise our health and minimise our need for pharmaceuticals. Now, it's nearly lunchtime, and I know this talk has been really heavy, but I do want to leave you with hope. There's been some encouraging developments in the US. RFK Jr., who is head of the NHS, is beginning a fight back against the grip that Pharma has on healthcare and policies. I believe it can be done. And I'm going to leave you, if the video works, I'm hoping, with the words of Florida Surgeon General Dr. Joseph Ladapo from a recent speech in which he announced the end of all vaccine mandates in the state of Florida. And it is a really beautiful exposition of medical ethics and the limitations of a doctor and government's power.
The Florida Department of Health, in partnership with the governor, is going to be working to end all vaccine mandates in Florida law. All of them. All of them. All of them. Every last one of them. Every last one of them. Every last one of them is wrong and drips with disdain and slavery. Okay? Who am I as a government, or anyone else, or who am I as a man standing here now, to tell you what you should put in your body? Who am I to tell you what your child should put in your body? I don't have that right. Your body is a gift from God. What you put into your body is because of your relationship with your body and your God. I don't have that right. Government does not have that right.
Amen. Thank you.